Welcome back to Sarah Mythology. Last time we were in the north. We climbed Yggdrasil from its serpent-gnawed roots to its eagle-crowned canopy. We watched Odin tear out his own eye and then hang on the world tree for 9 days to earn the runes from the darkness below. We stood at the edge of Ragnarok and understood why the Norse considered it not a tragedy but a philosophy. A reminder that the ending of things is not a reason to stop living. It is the reason to live completely. Today we travel east. Far east. To an island nation where the sun rises first. Where the divine and the human have always been understood as intimately, almost uncomfortably close. Where the gods did not create the world from some distant throne but waded into the primordial ocean and stirred it with a jeweled spear. We are going to Japan. To the world of Shinto, one of the oldest continuous spiritual traditions on earth. To stories carved not into clay or written on papyrus but passed through centuries in the voices of priests and the movements of sacred dances called kagura that are still performed today in the courtyards of shrines across the Japanese archipelago. And we are going to center our journey on one of the most unusual, most psychologically rich, most quietly astonishing stories in all of world mythology. The story of the sun goddess who locked herself in a cave, and the impossible thing the world had to do to bring her back. But before we get there, we have to build the world. Because the Japanese creation story is extraordinary in its own right and sets the stage for everything that follows. In the beginning, according to the Kojiki, the record of ancient matters, compiled in 712 CE and considered the oldest surviving chronicle in Japan, and its companion text the Nihon Shoki, the Chronicles of Japan, heaven and earth were not yet separated. They formed a single undivided mass, like a cosmic egg, heavy and dark and formless, with the seeds of everything inside it but nothing yet distinct. Then, from within this primordial mass, something lightened and rose. The clear and light elements ascended and became Takamagara, the plane of high heaven. The heavy and dark elements sank and became the earth. But the earth in its early state was not solid. It was fluid. It floated like oil on water, drifting and formless, without definition. The first beings who arose in Takamagara were the Zoka Sanshin, 3 separate divine forces of creation who played no active role in the physical making of the world, but whose existence enabled what came next. They are beings of pure becoming, of pure potential, who spontaneously appeared from the void, hid their forms, and were not seen again directly. Then came 2 generations of gods, also hidden in their divine forms, also not deeply involved in the making of the world. And then came Izanagi and Izanami. Their names mean the male one who invites and the female one who invites. They are the primal couple, the first husband and wife in the Japanese understanding of the cosmos. They were given a jeweled spear called the Aim no Nuboko, the heavenly jeweled spear, and they stood on the floating bridge of heaven, a rainbow bridge suspended between the heavens and the formless ocean below, and they lowered the spear into the ocean and stirred it. When they withdrew the spear, the drops that fell from its tip congealed and formed the first island. Onagoro-shima, the self-forming island. They descended to this island, and there, in the most direct and domestic possible terms, they created the rest of the Japanese islands, and then the gods who would inhabit and govern every aspect of the natural world. The gods of wind and sea and mountains and trees and rivers and fire. Every feature of the physical world of Japan, every mountain and river and wind and wave, was understood not as an inanimate feature of geography but as the expression of a divine personality. As a kami, a sacred presence. This is the fundamental insight of Shinto. The divine does not exist apart from the natural world. It is the natural world, experienced at its deepest level of reality. But the creation carried a cost. When Izanami gave birth to the god of fire, Kagetsuchi, the heat of the fire god burned her fatally. She died giving birth to the element that illuminates. Izanagi's grief was inconsolable. He killed the fire god in his rage. And then, unwilling to accept Izanami's death, he did what Gilgamesh did, what Orpheus would later do in Greek mythology, what every human being who has ever lost someone irreplaceable has wanted to do. He went to find her. He descended into Yomi, the underworld, the land of the dead, the realm of darkness and decay that exists below the world of the living. He called out to Izanami in the darkness. And Izanami heard him. She came to the entrance of the place where she was resting and spoke to him through the door. She said she had already eaten the food of Yomi. In most mythological traditions, eating the food of the underworld means you belong to it. as Persephone ate the pomegranate seeds in the Greek tradition and was bound to return to the underworld for part of every year. Izanami was now of the land of the dead. But she said she would speak to the gods of Yomi about whether she could return. She asked Izanagi to wait. She asked him specifically not to look at her. He waited. He waited a very long time. And then, in the darkness, he did what he had been told not to do. He broke off the end tooth of the comb in his hair and used it as a torch. He lit it and held it up to see. What he saw was Izanami in her state of decomposition. Her body inhabited by the 8 thunder gods that arise from decay. Rotting and terrible and vast with a specific horror of what the beloved becomes when the body returns to earth. He ran. Izanami, enraged and humiliated that he had looked when she had asked him not to, sent the Shikome, the hideous women of Yomi, after him. She sent the thunder gods after him. She herself pursued him. He fled through the darkness toward the world of the living, throwing obstacles behind him. His headdress which became grapes that the Shikome stopped to eat, his comb which became bamboo shoots that slowed them further. At the entrance to Yomi, he found 3 peaches and threw them at his pursuers. The peaches drove them back. The peach tree has been a symbol of protection and the warding off of evil spirits in Japanese tradition ever since. Then Izanagi sealed the entrance to Yomi with a great boulder. And Izanami called to him from behind it, saying that if he did this, she would kill 1,000 people every day. He answered that if she did, he would cause 1,500 births every day. And this, the ancient Japanese tradition explains, is why death and birth coexist in the world. The balance between them is the legacy of the separation between Izanagi and Izanami, between the world of the living and the world of the dead, between the one who left and the one who stayed behind. Izanagi returned to the world and performed ritual purification in a river, washing away the pollution of Yomi. And as he washed, new deities were born from the act of cleansing. From his left I came Amaterasu, the great goddess who illuminates heaven. From his right I came Tsukuyami, the moon god. From his nose came Susanoo, the wild and powerful storm god. These 3 children of the purification became the 3 primary deities of the natural world. Izanagi gave them their domains. Amaterasu received the plane of high heaven. Tsukuyami received the realm of the night. And Susanoo received the ocean. But Susanoo wept. He wept with such violence and such force that the mountains trembled and the seas raged and the forests died. He wept so completely that the world was shaking with his grief. When Izanagi asked him why, Susanoo said he wanted to go to the land of his mother. He wanted to go to Yomi, to find Izanami, the mother he had never known, who had died before he was born. Izanagi, perhaps still raw from his own terrible experience in Yomi, became furious. He banished Susanoo from his presence. Susanoo was cast out. But before he left for the land of the dead, Susanoo went to Takamagara, to the plane of high heaven, to say farewell to his sister Amaterasu. And this is where the central story of the episode truly begins. Amaterasu was suspicious of her brother's arrival. She knew his history of storms and destruction. She wondered if he had come to conquer her realm rather than simply to say goodbye. She armed herself with a bow and arrows and confronted him in battle regalia, her hair bound for war, ready. Susanoo insisted his intentions were peaceful. They resolved their dispute through a divine ritual called yuki, a form of oath-taking by procreation. Each of them would create beings from objects belonging to the other, and the nature of those beings would demonstrate the purity of Susanoo's intent. Amaterasu took Susanoo's sword, broke it into 3 pieces, chewed them, and breathed them out as mist. From the mist came 3 goddesses. Susanoo took Amaterasu's jewels from her hair and her arms, chewed them, and breathed them out. From the mist came 5 male gods. The argument about who had won this ritual, and what it proved about Susanoo's intentions, was left somewhat ambiguous. But Susanoo declared victory. And emboldened, or perhaps maddened, by whatever had been loosened in him, he began to behave with catastrophic violence. He destroyed the rice paddies Amaterasu had planted, the sacred fields that fed the world, filling in the irrigation ditches, tearing down the boundaries between plots. He desecrated the sacred weaving hall where Amaterasu's maidens worked, throwing a flayed horse through the roof so violently that one of the maidens died from shock and injury. The halls of heaven were in chaos. Everything Amaterasu had built and tended, the order she had maintained, the beauty she had cultivated, was destroyed or violated by her brother's rampage. And Amaterasu, the goddess of the sun, the source of all light and life and growing things, withdrew. She entered the Amano-Iwato, the heavenly rock cave. She pulled a boulder across the entrance, and the light went out of the world. Think about what this means. This is not a seasonal metaphor only, though it is that too. This is something more fundamental. The primary source of light and warmth and growth in the universe, in a state of such grief and outrage and devastation that it turns away from the world entirely. The world goes dark. The crops stop growing. The warmth leaves the air. The divine order breaks down. Evil spirits emerge in the darkness. The 8 million gods, all the kami of all things, gathered in despair and confusion and rising panic. The darkness lasted. The world was failing. And all the gods of Takamagara gathered at the entrance to the rock cave and tried to figure out what to do. They tried reasoning. They tried pleading. Amaterasu did not emerge. And then someone proposed a plan so unexpected, so wild, so apparently inappropriate to the gravity of the situation that it has fascinated scholars and practitioners and storytellers for over 1,000 years. They decided to throw a party. But not just any party. They prepared everything precisely. A sacred tree, a sakaki, was decorated with jewels, with cloth, with a magnificent bronze mirror. Roosters were brought whose crowing announces the dawn. Torches were lit. Every arrangement was made. And then a goddess named Aim no Yuzum, the goddess of dawn and celebration and what in Japanese is called Tama, the vital spirit, took the stage. She stood on an overturned tub in front of the cave. She was seized by divine inspiration, by the particular kind of wild sacred ecstasy that exists in every tradition as the point where the human vessel is taken over by something larger. She began to dance. She danced, and the nature of her dance was uninhibited in a way that was extraordinary for a sacred context. She exposed herself. She moved with wildness and abandon and a sacred comedy that was completely at odds with the solemnity of the crisis. And the 8 million gods burst into laughter. The laughter of the gods was so enormous, so complete, so joyful and thunderous and alive, that Takamagara itself shook with it. Amaterasu, inside the cave, heard the laughter. And something in it reached her. In the depths of her retreat, in the cold darkness of her withdrawal, she heard the sound of joy. And she could not understand it. Why were they laughing? The world was dark. She had left. Everything should be in mourning. Why was there laughter? She opened the boulder just slightly, just enough to look out, and asked what was happening. Why, in her absence, when the world should be in grief and fear, were the gods celebrating? Aim no Yuzum answered that there was a new, magnificent deity whose brilliance exceeded even Amaterasu's own. This was the moment. The god Aim no Tajikareo, the god of strength and athletic power, who had been waiting by the boulder for exactly this moment, seized it and pulled it fully open. And the mirror was angled so that Amaterasu, stepping forward in curiosity and suspicion to see this brilliant new deity, saw herself. Her own radiance, reflected back at her in the bronze mirror, so luminous that she did not immediately recognize it as herself. She stepped forward. She was drawn out. And light returned to the world. The gods quickly drew a sacred rope, a Shimenawa, across the entrance of the cave so she could not retreat again. And Susanoo was punished. His beard was cut, his fingernails and toenails removed, and he was expelled from Takamagara forever, cast down to the world below. Now I want to sit with this story for a moment, because it is doing something extraordinarily sophisticated on multiple levels simultaneously. On the surface it is a nature myth. The sun withdrawing and returning. The cycle of seasons, or of eclipse, or simply of those moments in winter when the sky is consistently dark and the world feels like light has been forgotten. Every agricultural civilization has needed a story to explain and contain the terror of the sun's absence. Japan found this story. But beneath the nature myth, there is a psychological portrait so accurate it is almost clinical. What Amaterasu is experiencing is what any human being experiences when they have been violated, when the sanctuary they built and tended has been desecrated by someone they trusted. The withdrawal from the world. The shutting of the self inside a dark place. The inability of reason or pleading to reach what is hidden in there. The cave of the self after trauma is exactly this, a boulder pulled across the entrance, with all the light locked inside. And the method of drawing Amaterasu out is not logic. It is not argument. It is not force. The gods do not threaten or bargain. They create something alive and joyful and wild right outside the cave. They create laughter. They create a celebration so genuine and so complete that even grief cannot ignore it. They hold a light outside the darkness that is irresistible to curiosity. Every person who has ever sat with someone in their darkest time and understood that the way through is not persuasion but presence, not argument but genuine aliveness, is practicing the wisdom of Aim no Yuzume's dance. And the mirror. The sacred mirror is one of the 3 imperial treasures of Japan, the Yata no Kagami, which is kept to this day in the grand shrine of Ise as one of the holiest objects in the Shinto tradition. The mirror works in the Amaterasu myth not as a trick exactly, though it functions as one, but as a deeper truth. Amaterasu steps out of the cave because she sees her own brilliance reflected. She is drawn out by the sight of what she actually is. The mirror tells her the truth about herself that the darkness inside the cave had made her forget. This is a mythological statement about the nature of depression and withdrawal and self-forgetting that is stunning in its precision. You cannot argue someone out of the cave. You cannot pull them out by force. But if you can hold up a mirror that shows them, even briefly, even for one curious moment, the light they still carry inside them even in the darkness, they may step forward. Even just a step. Even just enough to let the others draw the Shimenawa across and make it harder to go back. Now let us draw the connections across traditions, as we always do on Sera mythology. The motif of the sun withdrawing and having to be drawn back appears in Japanese myth in the story of Amaterasu, but the structure, the divine being who retreats and whose return requires an extraordinary act, is global. In Aztec mythology, the sun required blood sacrifice to continue its daily journey and had to be actively maintained by human action. In Egyptian mythology, the sun god Ra traveled through the underworld every night and had to survive 12 hours of darkness and battle before being reborn at dawn. In Greek mythology, Demeter, goddess of the harvest, withdrew her gifts from the world when her daughter Persephone was taken to the underworld, and the world became barren until a resolution was found. Each tradition is asking the same question. What do you do when the source of life and warmth and growth turns away? What do you offer to something that has withdrawn into darkness? And each tradition is answering in its own way, with its own texture and flavor and particular genius. The Japanese answer is beautiful because it is joyful. Not sacrifice, not war, not pleading. A dance. An act of wild sacred joy performed in front of the sealed door. The conviction that life, genuine life, irrepressible and laughing and unseemly and alive, is the only thing powerful enough to call the sun back from the cave. The concept of kami itself, the idea that the sacred is not separate from the natural world but present within it, in the rustle of leaves and the sound of a mountain stream and the specific quality of light on a particular rock face, this idea has exact parallels in animist traditions across the globe. The Shinto tradition is perhaps the most elaborated form of this universal intuition, the sense that the world is not dead matter but alive with presence, that every natural phenomenon is a being with interiority, with something like a self, with something that can be honored and communicated with and offended. In the Japanese tradition, even today, new kami are recognized. Kami of the railway and the smartphone and the internet. The sacred does not belong to the past. It inhabits the present in every form it takes. This is not archaic thinking. It may be the most sophisticated possible relationship with a living world. And Susanoo, after his expulsion from heaven, does not disappear from the tradition. He descends to the earth and does something extraordinary. He becomes a hero. He saves a young woman from an 8-headed serpent called Yamata no Orochi by getting it drunk on sake and slaying it while it sleeps. And inside the serpent's tail, he finds a magnificent sword, the Kusanagi no Tsurugi, the grass-cutting sword, which he presents to Amaterasu as a gift. This sword, along with a sacred mirror and a sacred jewel, forms the 3 imperial treasures of Japan, the Sanshu no Jinji, which are still central to the Shinto understanding of imperial authority today. The storm god who destroys is also the hero who saves. The brother who desecrates is also the brother who gives the greatest gift. Susanoo is one of mythology's finest portraits of the truth that destruction and creation, chaos and courage, are not opposites but 2 expressions of the same enormous energy. What makes that energy devastating or beautiful is not the energy itself, but whether it has been given a worthy object. Susanoo in heaven, with nothing worthy enough to contain his wildness, became catastrophic. Susanoo on earth, with the 8-headed serpent to face, became a legend. This is the gift of Japanese mythology to the human imagination. A universe understood as alive down to its smallest particle. Gods who are intimate and present, not distant and unknowing. A sun goddess who experiences grief so complete that the world loses its light. And the astonishing, counterintuitive, perfectly calibrated response. Not war, not logic, not force. A dance. And laughter. And a mirror held up to show someone the light they forgot they carried. This has been episode 6 of Sarah Mythology. We stood on the floating bridge of heaven and watched the jeweled spear stir the primordial ocean into the first island. We followed Izanagi into the underworld and felt the horror of what he found there. We watched Susanoo tear apart everything his sister had built. And we stood with the 8 million gods outside the boulder-sealed cave, in the dark, holding our breath as Aimnuyazum climbed onto the overturned tub and began to dance. The sun came back. It always comes back. But sometimes it needs to hear laughter first. Next time we cross to ancient Egypt. To the civilization that spent more time, more energy, more architectural genius, more philosophical sophistication on the question of what happens after death than any other civilization in human history. We meet Osiris, the god who died and was reassembled. His wife Isis, the greatest magician who ever lived. And the trial in the Hall of Two Truths, where your heart is weighed against a feather, and the entire balance of your life is decided in a single moment. The sun is back. It was always coming back. See you at the next fire.